I'll call the meeting to order. We've been posted properly.
The meeting has been posted according to law.
Roll call.
President Johnson.
Here.
Trustee Harding. Here. Trustee Holm.
Here.
Trustee Moody.
Here.
Trustee Nugent. Here. Trustee Seeger.
Here. And Trustee Wisniewski is excused for the evening. Citizen participation per village resolution 2017-01. Anyone wishing to address the village board during citizen participation will be allowed 5 minutes. Your subject must specifically relate to matters under the jurisdiction of the village board, whether on the agenda or not. The village board should not engage in a discussion regarding comments because it was not part of the publicly noticed agenda. Upon conclusion of the citizen participation segment, members of the audience are not allowed further comment unless they are participating in a public hearing or if specifically allowed by a majority vote of the village board due to involvement in an agenda item. Okay, I was about to say, did I read that mouthful for no one? Just hit the little people icon button there, the light will turn green, and then state your name and address, please.
William Knoll, 1922 Division Streets. Just a general inquiry. The alley between Fremont and Division is in very poor condition, and I was curious if it's under consideration for repair, or who can I talk to see if it's under consideration?
Is that something you can follow up with after the meeting?
Sure can.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Steve Lambert, 2018 Beulah Avenue. I'm here to speak about the possibility of the angled parking on Clark Street. I don't know if you guys have made a decision, but I am in favor of it for a number of reasons. I think it would help a lot of the congestion that's in that area. I've been here before about parking concerns for the church. I think with the new restaurant there, it would help. I understand the concerns that residents have brought up, but I don't know if you're ever going to be able to please everyone. I was here speaking a few years ago when you guys were talking about taking out the dam, and I know there were people here speaking that wanted to keep the dam. And you guys made the tough choice to remove the dam, and I think that was transformational for the village. I think what it looks like now compared to what it looked like before, it couldn't look nicer in my opinion. And so I know those decisions don't always make everyone happy, but I wish I had come up with the idea of the angled parking there because I think it's a great idea, but I did not. There's so many things that you guys have to balance. You know, you have residents' concerns, you have business concerns, whether that's industrial, whether that's services. I think increasing that parking there would help. We are actively trying to get another church back in that because that is, to me, the best use of that portion of the building. And we have a church that would like to come in there. One of their concerns is parking, you know, even for a Sunday Mass where they've got 15 cars. There, I think that would aid a lot in that. When I was here a couple weeks ago, there was not a single person on Union that expressed concerns about the angled parking. There were like 3, I think, on Main Street. Again, nobody on Clark Street. So I don't know if the decision's been made, and maybe you can make that a one-way street coming off of Main Street to eliminate that concern about pulling out into traffic. Turn as the traffic maybe can head just to the north. I would be happy to work with whoever. I just think if we could get some additional parking there, it might alleviate a lot of issues in that neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, and no decision has been made yet. Other comments during citizen participation? Going once? Going twice? Okay, I will close citizen participation. We will move on to consent agenda. One motion and a second will approve all the following items. Any item may be pulled from the list and voted on separately.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to miscellaneous business. Item 1, consider request by Library Board to utilize impact fees to contract with Hamel, Green, and Abramson, Inc., HGA, to assist in determining library facility needs. Tammy?
Hello, this is really right there now, isn't it? All right, so, okay, there we go. I put together a slideshow presentation about some things we hope to change about the library. I apologize to those of you who were at the Tri-Troy meeting last year because you've heard a lot of the beginning, but I wanted, knowing that half your board is new, I wanted to catch them up to speed. So, the first thing, you can go ahead and next slide. So the meeting that I came to last year was to go over the fact that the library was going through a strategic planning process. And so they got a much more in-depth explanation of that. So I'm just going to skim the highlights. This particular slide just shows you how many people we had complete the survey. It was just over 100 people, and as you can see, 27% of them use the library weekly, but there were a great variety of library users, all the way to 12%, I think it is, that never used the library that gave us feedback. So I thought it was a really good cross-section of East Troy. For each of the three goals that we established, I have one slide, the one that kind of tipped the scales. So this one talks about infrequent and never using the library users, how they find out about events, with the idea that if they don't come to the library very often, it may be because they don't hear about what's happening. And the number one way that they find out about events going on is social media, and then newspaper, word of mouth, and community signage. And so in the next slide, you'll see that our first strategic goal had to do with expanding the way that we communicate. We created an Instagram account, picked up the number of Facebook posts we do, trying to do it at least weekly. And we did generate quite a few new users, followers. We have over 1,000 followers now, and when I started, I know it was much, much lower than that. The next slide will talk about both frequent and infrequent library users and people who have never visited. Also talked about things that might get them there, like different hours or different programming. And so if our next strategic goal talked about, we added a few more hours on Monday because we were not quite up to our pre-COVID hours. And then we also started focusing on adult programming and Saturday programming. And then the final slide from the strategic plan that I pulled is, by a significant margin, community members' top priority for potential space changes at East Troy Lions is for a library expansion or a new building. Number one was consider an expansion. Number two was more comfortable spaces, then more private work study rooms, outdoor seating, and a dedicated collaborative workspace. The current building was built in 1969 by the Lions Club, and it was originally used as the youth center. And at the time, split level was big. So when you go in the main door of the library, you're faced with steps that go up and steps that go down, which is part of our problem. We have put a lot of work, here you can see on the lower level. When Nancy O'Connell passed away, the community gave us $6,000 in donations. And one of the ways we spent it is revamping that space. We brightened it up with painting, and we added a lot more book shelving in that area that was accessible. In the past, the ones that you can see in the far corner were in a room that was always locked. The furniture you see there was donated by the Friends, the blue couches and chairs. So we did that. However, because we're split level, you can't get to it except through that. So those are the stairs to get to the lower level. And if you think that left-hand picture looks scary, it's because it is. They are very steep. And my first year as the director was 3 years ago, and we had not yet added adult programming post-COVID. My first event for adults was for Veterans Day. And watching those gentlemen go down the stairs just about gave me a heart attack. So the library board looked into the idea of doing a chairlift. However, the state would not issue a permit unless the lift also accommodated wheelchairs. And these pictures don't show the lovely PVC piping that runs above that, but our men's bathroom is right above that. To put a ramp that would allow for a wheelchair, we'd have to take out the men's bathroom, which means we would only have one bathroom, which means that our capacity would go down. So we did not pursue it. Okay. I think I go this way. So strategic goal number 3 had to do with how we were going to handle our space. As you saw in that one slide, we tried to make it much more inviting, much more welcoming. There was a lot of furniture that I think was donated when people didn't know what to do with things that I got rid of because it was just a huge pile of things, and it was not, well, let's just say I like the vinyl because I can wipe it down. And we, as I said, brightened it up. We make that space available for people who want some quiet or privacy or something like that, but it's not staffed. We have security cameras, so I can monitor them that way. And so we only allow adults, an adult that wants to watch a video on their computer or needs to make a phone call or just needs a space where they can get away from it. But it's not as flexible as it could be. And if we have programming, they can't do it. There's no privacy down there if we have programming. So instead, one of the things that we've done is we have partnered with the community center, and we've had, if a program is really targeted, the target audience is elderly, we try to have it there so that they don't have to face those steps. Or we do it in both places, like our sourdough program. We had it in the afternoon at the community center. In the library, we did a follow-up that evening. But that means that we're at the mercy of their schedule, and it also means that if they ever lose that space, if the school district ever takes it back, or if they can no longer afford to be there, we would lose that. Okay. One of the pieces of information that I don't think any of you saw when I did the strategic plan thing, presentation in last April, was this slide, because in addition to the information we received from the survey, Wills, which is this organization that helped guide us through the process, was able to take the annual reports from libraries across Wisconsin and do comparables with libraries of our size or communities of our size. So the 2 graphs you see here are East Troy compared to communities with 5,000 people or less. The one on the left has to do with our square footage. So you see at just under 5,000 square feet, we're significantly smaller than the average. The one on the right is population. So we have a smaller space, but you'll see we just made that 5,000 cutoff. The majority of the other libraries in that slot are 3,000. So we've got a lot less space for more people. Okay.
Tammy, hey, Tammy, real quick.
Yes,
If we were to, because we've talked about Tri-Troy,
yes.
what's the average square footage for over 5,000, like 5 to 10,000?
That I'd have to look up.
Okay.
But I will. Write that down, Christina, so I remember. We have our board president here, as well as Mary, who serves on your behalf on the board. All right, so The board at the beginning of the year asked me to help them pursue the possibility of an expansion. And so some of you may have been here long enough in and out of on and off the board or just in the community to know that we've done this before. The last time was in 2013, and it never got off the ground, mainly, I think, because it was supposed to be a joint effort where it would have senior housing, a library, and a community center. And so we had 3 different goals, and it was really too big a mouthful. So the people who were most interested in the community center were like, you know what, this is taking too long, we're just going to do it. And they've been going for 6 or 7 years, I think. The senior housing was still going to include us, but then they had problems finding property that was large enough to accommodate both of us. So it just kind of dwindled into nothing. So this time around, we're like, okay, this is us, just us, especially given the fact that the village does own quite a bit of property where we are currently located. So we interviewed, we put together a committee that looked for architects that had experience with libraries, and we interviewed 3 of them. HGA is the one that we preferred. And so from here on out, most of the slides come directly from their presentation. The first slide here talks about, the first couple slides will all address our first question, which was, what do you know about East Troy community? Now, to give you a clue on the combinations and why this impressed us so much, of the 3 we interviewed, 1 showed us an overview of where the library was in relation to the schools and the community center. Another one had a slide full of information I had told him. And then we had HGA, who broke down different aspects about the community. I thought, as a village board, you might be most interested in the trends section, because that's something that would speak to what it is that you work towards. And this is their perceptions of how you're doing. I thought it was the corn and brat roast was particularly interesting, because I spent 3 hours serving everybody brats. And volunteerism, they specifically mentioned the Lions Club. Okay. But in addition to this, they have, so the first slide was their research into East Troy. This slide is research into the library itself. So a lot of it comes off of our website, including information from the strategic plan, which they looked over. And before the interviews, each architect came to meet me, get a tour of the building, get some background information, and they asked me about the strategic plan and the goals and what we hoped to do, which neither of the other architects even mentioned the fact that we had one. And then the big wow is the next slide. The lead architect, Kevin, and his wife spent a day in East Troy. So they had breakfast. They had a pancake breakfast out at Army Lake. They had lunch at Gus's. They took Kelly's pot pie home for dinner. And they walked around and they talked to people. And they asked them about their feelings on the library. And if you go to the next slide, this is, that visual that shows you what words came up the most. Books, of course, quaint. I'm glad to see friendly, and staff is up there, but you'll also notice small. And the next one gives quotes. All right, so it's very small there, but the very first one, I wish we had more windows. It feels dark, which I have a slide later on that will really highlight that. But the stairs are too steep and scary. Everything's jammed in. They need more space. And then they want me to have 5 different copies of each Krista Hanna book, which I don't have any space for. So, but these are the things that the community told Kevin and his wife. Okay, so they had us hooked with that, but then more about what they can do. 2 of the architects, HGA and 1 other, talked about how important it is when they're working with a library, when they're working on a building, that they have somebody that's with engineering and HVAC experience along the way, because that helps them plan realistically and keep an eye on the budget and things like that. One other architect had brought a firm that they work with on a regular basis, and he was the one who said, this is wonderful. It makes such a big difference for me because I can help them avoid problems early. HGA doesn't have to do that because they have all of those services integrated in-house. They have engineers, they have people that focus on lighting and landscaping and all of that. And so the next slide shows you this is the team that would work with Kevin and Erica and Kim, who had come to talk to us, including a cost estimator who would make sure that once we set the budget, that we stay within that. I remember I used to work for the school district, and I was on the committee that helped with Little Prairie. And I remember that architect, when we would meet, would say, well, within your budget, we've made these choices, and this won't be. So Joe will help us do that. Okay, and then, of course, we were interested in library experience. So you'll see that they've worked with 108 library clients, 3 million square feet of library. That just boggles me. I just can't grasp that. 110 different library renovation projects, over 200 library projects total. And then we got to see some of them. So they definitely have the experience. We were able to tour, if the next slide gives you some of the libraries in this area that they've worked on. Dodgeville is the one that is most like us. However, we couldn't look at Dodgeville because they're breaking ground in about 2 weeks. But we were able to view Milwaukee Public Libraries. So the next slide will show you the Dodgeville project. And this was the other big thing that hooked a lot of us. They've worked with Dodgeville for 10 years. And so this is an architectural firm that will stick with us, unlike the last one. The last one we worked with in 2013, he gave the sales pitch for the job and then sold his business. So we're looking forward to the idea of working with a company that will stay around. So they worked with Dodgeville 10 years ago. There's a lot of things that you have to hammer out before you can start a project like this. First of all, will we be on the property that we're there? Would we expand? Or would we tear down and build new? And those were some of the factors with Dodgeville that it took a while to get consensus on so that people would be happy with the final project. And these are drawings of what they hope, what it will look like. They decided to stay where they were. And the week that they were interviewing, they were just finalizing bids. And I checked out their website. They were supposed to break ground next week, but it's delayed like 2 weeks. So we couldn't look at that. So we went to Milwaukee. And I picked this. This is actually not a Milwaukee Public Library, but I picked this one because if you've never looked at the ceiling at the library, you should, because it's beautiful. Architecturally, it's the prettiest part of the building. The one on the right is us. You can't really tell. I mean, actually, I think I said something about it at a board meeting, and one of the board members was like, the ceiling? Because you get distracted by the lights. In their presentation, they had the one on the left where it's a similar ceiling, but it has a lot of windows, per the comment earlier about our library being very dark, and the lighting doesn't take away from the ceiling. And so I really liked that about their designs. In the next slide, we'll get to the libraries that we toured. So they sent us to Milwaukee Public Library because A, it's finished, and B, it's close to it. We toured 2 libraries in Milwaukee. One of them was a renovation, and one of them was a build from scratch. They tore down and built. And then we also talked to Joan Johnson, who is the director of the Milwaukee Public Libraries. At the time, she was a deputy director and worked with Kevin and his crew, and she had nothing but good things to say about them. At one point, she said that she could count on Kevin for anything he said he was going to do, he would do. And she said, I can't say that about a lot of people and firms. So the first one was the tear down, or this is the tear down one. It's the Milwaukee Public Library East Branch. For this one, for both of these libraries, there was a trend in about 13 years ago where Milwaukee, they had land and they needed better libraries. And they, of course, didn't have money, right? Always the problem. So they offered the land to a developer and said, you can develop what you want here, but the bottom has to be a library. So both of them ended up having apartments upstairs. The tear down, the East Branch of the library was too small to meet the needs of the community, but the community loved their library. And so they took as much as they could from the old library and incorporated it into what they built. So on the left there, you see that wooden ceiling. They took the ceiling from the old library and they incorporated it into one half of the new library. But instead of laying them side by side, they turned them. And then you can see they put the lights in between. And above the that ceiling that we see is all of the ductwork. And so not only is it beautiful, but the noise from the library, from the, it's right above the kids section and the stacks and stuff like that, has a place to go above that wooden drop ceiling. And actually, this one won an award from the International Interior Design Alliance, or Association, I think it is, for their lighting. And then on the next slide, you'll see that those stained glass windows were also from the other building, and they go around those walls and close the meeting spaces that they created. I don't have slides for it, but they also took trees that they had to take down and they used it to build tables and an art installation as well. Now, as I said, that was, and here, that's the next one. But the thing about that first one is, it's really expensive when you do the award-winning version. I don't really have so much of a picture there, but they have this meeting space in the middle I call a fishbowl. I didn't really like it because I just didn't like it. I'll be much more conservative in the spending of money. Right, Mary? Yes. She'll be right there with me. All right. So then the next slide is more along this one is the renovation. This is Mitchell Library, and this one is it was formerly Schuster's department store, and it's an historic building. So there wasn't a lot that they could do with changing it. However, they got the big windows from the department store. They have those columns, and they also have this beautiful staircase that came along with the building. But even though they had limitations, the library itself was, it was beautiful and it was very functional. This space was set aside for their teens, but they find that because of the windows and the fact that there's plugins for computers, that adults use it during the day and teens love it later on. But it's really the most of the space is stacks and like incorporating activities for the kids along with the books and things like that. Instead of the other one, it was very separate. In the next slide, you can see this is their two of the the two pictures on either end, the two to the left and the two to the right, those are their meeting space. All of the architects talked about the fact that if you have a meeting room, a community room, you want it to be very flexible. And so in the top one, it's very traditionally set up. That blue wall behind it is a storage room, so all of that furniture can fold or stack and be put in there. So you can, not that I would, but you could have a breakdancing competition, or you could have wrestlers in there, or, you could have meetings and things like that too. And the one on the upper right is actually from the library looking at the meeting space. And I don't know if you can tell, but they have an airport door that opens up so that if they have overflow, people can be in the library and still participate. They can still see and they can still hear. The two pictures in the middle they have a lower level, a basement level that they were able to turn into a makerspace. And so they used garage doors to protect things that you didn't want people to touch if there's not staffing. So the two orange boxes are actually the little recessed rooms with computers, and then the third one on the right that's with the garage door closed. And the top one is a kitchen. Okay. I think this is my last slide. So all of these things made us really comfortable with HGA, walking around with them for the day, touring the buildings and stuff like that. They're very personable, they're very good, and well, we like them very much. So we'd like to hire them. In your packet, you have detailed lots of words explaining their process and their fees and stuff like that. For the pre-design process, working their way towards actual designs. In the end, there were 3 options listed, and the library board is interested in option number 2. We felt that the first one was too bare bones, and the third one was just way too much. One of the things the third one would include is like a virtual reality tour, and that was not something we thought we needed to spend money on. But it's a bit like, although they create options 1, 2, and 3, it's more like to give you an idea of what your total would be. It's more really a la carte. So if we decide for any of the things, like one of them was the stakeholder meetings, if we decide that we don't need one of them, they won't bill us for it. What they do is at the end of each month, they bill you for what it is that they have done. And so it's not necessarily how much it would cost. Another example is part of option 2 is having drawings done of the building. When they come visit us next week, one of the things on our agenda is to go through any blueprints that we have in the building to see if we have something that would help them and cut down on the cost and things like that. So that is our ask. You have the control of the impact fees that we could use potentially to pay for this. And so we're just asking you to release the money so that we can move forward and try to give the community a better space. So, any questions?
Thank you, Tammy.
You're welcome.
Questions? Comments?
Comments? Allowed some?
You are allowed comments, yes.
Thank you. Because I was able to sit in on the interview process with the different architects and was able to go to the different libraries, and it was very impressive, their ability to work with what they had. I've lived in this community a long time. We've had hand-me-downs for libraries. Now, I'm not sure I really visited this, or I was told, but there was a library that used to be above the fire station that was on the square, on the southwest corner where there is now a parking lot. That's where the fire station, the library was upstairs. From there, it was moved to is it the Hibbert House? I've heard it called different names, on the corner. So, yeah, then we moved there. Then we went to the Lions. So we've always been hand-me-down. So it just feels like we're ready for the next step. One of the things that has been discussed a lot is location. And some of you have known that we've been offered a variety of things, and it was not very feasible. Putting a new library on that site is close to the schools, it's close to the parks. It's in a good location, which would be valuable. But it's time to really rethink, because the Lions, thank you for their generosity, but that building, and you probably could address it more, has what is its lifespan? You don't have to answer that. The other thing, if we have the money available with impact fees to get a good architectural design, this might be the impetus to get a foundation going, people in the community supporting it, to raise the funds to get a new library. One of the things I liked about this firm is their patience. Dodgeville, they've been working with that community for 10 years, so it's not like we're going to be building something next year. But if we have the plans and we have the ability to be prepared for it, I think that might be what we need to keep it moving along.
So you're right. This community has been nothing but hand-me-down everything as far as the library is concerned. I love this idea. I love the concept. The thing that I keep on seeing over and over and over again is this presentation, the idea of let's do this, let's paint the pretty picture, but we never do anything with it. So if we're going to go forward with this, of which I'm in agreement of doing so, let's make sure that we're doing it with the mindset that we're taking those next steps as well. And it may not be financially feasible right now, but maybe when we start talking our budget discussions, we can start allocating a certain amount of funds. And with a company like this architectural firm that has identified they've lasted 10 years with another community, we've gone from 2013, 12 years. We've had conceptual drawings. We've had ideas that have been thrown around. But if we're going to take these next steps, stop the dreaming process, let's start actually identifying the needs of this community and take those next steps past the $26,000 that we want to allocate toward architectural needs that we have to do this. So I'm excited about it, but I just want to make sure that we're not going to do this again, where we just throw a little bit of money at it, say, yep, it's a pretty picture, and then push it down the road again. Let's actually do something with it this time.
Argument for me or the board, trust me. Christine, did you want to say anything? Could you please introduce yourself, because there's some...
Absolutely. I'm Christina Murphy, and I've been on the board for a while, and I've been president for the last couple of years. And this is the first time that I really feel positive that we are going in the right direction. We spent a lot of time in the ensuing years between, 2013 and now, thinking, dreaming, and planning. So we feel that we're prepared to go forward because I think everything is coming together with HGA. And really, thank you for allowing us to do the presentation. It's really appreciated. Thanks.
Mary, you mentioned community involvement and fundraising. And I'm thinking, what comes first here, the chicken or the egg? Have the idea of naming rights, either on the building or in some of the meeting spaces, are there folks around that we could be or should be engaging now in those conversations and giving them an opportunity to provide input, if in fact this is something that they would want to step forward and support?
Well, part of the process is to identify the stakeholders in the community, the process that HGA will guide us through, and to reach out and to get their thoughts, and to help yes, businesses in town, but also the general user and things like that, so that they have an opportunity. As far as naming rights or anything like that, that's really a decision for the library board, so I won't comment on that. But I think that you're right, we do need to engage them as well. And I'd also like to say, like, I think in the past, as I said earlier, part of the problem was in 2013, it wasn't just the library, and it wasn't really even the library that we started the process, and then other people took it over. And so, yeah, and so we were never in control. And so this time around, we want to be in control so that we can keep it going, because we're the people who care. So, do you want to have a building named after you?
No, but you just never know. There are people in the community, whether East Troy or on a larger scope, that are looking for opportunities to make a mark, to make a gift, to support something that's valuable to them. And I'm just wondering in my mind, at what point do we reach out and try to identify who that might be?
I think you're right on with that one. I've not only been involved with the board, but also with the baseball and community, or the baseball and softball. And there are a lot of people in this community that would love to donate towards something like this. We just simply have to ask them. That's their biggest concern, is that nobody ever asks. So if we do get involved with this whole process and identifying that we want to have naming rights and investors into this library, we need to go ask them. It's that simple. So
We also need to ask them what they want out of it. Any kind of like meeting spaces. Next week, we're going to do a program at the community center on scams and frauds. And the gentleman who is presenting has several other, I think I have 3 pages of different programs that he does, and some of them are specifically for businesses. And so this would be an opportunity too, to reach out, find out who they are, and, hey, would you like me to arrange for this program so that you can come see what Home I was just there last week. Home on the Square. My mom bought a bracelet there. I think you were working, and I spent a lot of time looking at your jewelry. There's a couple of pieces I really want, but now my hair covers my ears. I'll get it chopped just so I can shop.
So I think timing-wise, this is excellent timing, and I think we've got a lot of things going for us. All the things you mentioned about this is to do a library, not to do a three-party deal. We're making progress. I, again, hope we get through the budget process, the biennial budget process with the state, and we get the state statutes changed so we could form a tri-Troy library. We've got momentum from the towns to be a part of that, so that expands our financial base here on the public side. But I think to what the board here is saying is we'll want to look at this as a public-private partnership to help drive some of those funds. So I think as you all talk with HCA, it is how do we take the plans that come out of this, the architectural, all of those questions that you pointed out that a study like this is designed to answer, and then dovetail that into a capital campaign to pull that together. And that might be over 2 or 3 years. And then, as Scott said, during that time, we and hopefully the other 2 communities are able to set aside funds, and then we see what the gap is, and we will go through that. I guess my one question is, I know Whitewater just redid their library, and I don't know if it was all publicly funded or if there was a public-private relationship there. Do you know?
I don't. Aram is doing theirs right now in Delavan. They're actually in our library system, so I can ask them, and I can reach out to Whitewater and things like that and find out how they made it happen.
Elkhorn, was that partly a grant too they got? if I
It
remember
was a
correctly?
grant, and tomorrow Chad's going to speak at the directors' meeting about how it's going.
And this was 20 years ago, maybe a little more. I know Edgerton redid theirs, and I do know that was a public-private, there was a capital campaign, so maybe somebody there could help us on just how they structured that. So,
And the Edgerton was one of the original Carnegie in Rock County. And I've been to that library, and it's fascinating what did with the old part as well as the new part. Yeah. So there's interesting options out there.
so I want, so that we make a correct motion here for you, Tammy. I'm looking at, there's no page numbers here. Oh, sorry, there's the top, bottom of page 4 and top of page 5. So is it just option 2, or is there something plus option 2?
Option 2 plus, okay, so if you see option 2, it's not any better with or without, 36,750, but then underneath is the optional documentation, which we may very well need. And then underneath option 3, it talks about $750 for miscellaneous. So the ask was for those 3 things combined, so it was just over 40,000.
And how much do we have available on impact fees?
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of, it's over 100,000.
So I just want to remind, I guess, both the board and the public, that these are impact fees that were collected with new development with the intention of supporting the library, and we can't really use them for other things. So given what we're trying to do here, I think that makes sense. I will make a motion then to approve the use of impact fees up to, I'm going to say 45,000 in case you need a little bit of extra room, to execute an agreement, for the library board to execute an agreement with HGA to do option 2 in this proposal, along with the optional services for 2,500 and the, I'm not saying it, but miscellaneous 750.
I'll second that.
Questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you all very much. So next fall, or this fall, hopefully we'll get a report. Okay. We're on to item 2, wastewater facilities planning presentation.
Can you make it as exciting?
So.
I don't think the pictures are going to be as good.
Everyone's leaving. Okay, so we've done a lot of master planning recently. We all know we just completed, well, we haven't completed, but we're on the backside of master planning for the airport, right? A couple years ago, we did master planning for the water utility. So about a year and a half ago, I said, we need to do master planning for the sewer utility, and that helps Brian and his team help us make good financial decisions as we're going through budgeting and financial planning. So I set out with Applied Technologies, and we have Leo Kusek from Applied Tech. Applied Tech is the firm we use for our sewer utility. And said, hey, we need to do some master planning. And he said, no, what you really need to do is you need to do facilities planning because this checks a box for DNR. So it's dual purpose. Every 20 years or so, give or take, the DNR will require we go through a facilities plan. And that's why in here it talks about a public hearing and us actually adopting it at some point. So I said, that's a great idea. So we hired him to do that. Applied Tech came in, met with staff, talked about concerns, and assessed all of our wastewater facilities with the idea of what do we need for the next 20 years. So that's where I'll leave it. And Leo, you can give us your presentation.
Well, first of all, I apologize. I don't have nearly as pretty pictures as those libraries. So, yeah. So, and I don't know who's, there you go. Thank you so much. So, I want to talk very high level tonight. This is really an introduction to the conclusions we reached. But tonight is all about sharing what we learned. And then if there's back and forth, either I can give you answers tonight, or if I don't know the answer tonight, I can follow up. And so that's the intent of tonight's meeting. So really, first thing I want to talk about is the need for the project. And I'm saying project, but really there's a couple different pieces here. We can talk a little bit about how the village should best tackle those pieces. We'll talk about the scope and the costs associated with each of those parts of kind of an overall project. Ultimately, rates, and how is this going to end up impacting users here in the village, and then a schedule, or at least a proposed schedule, as one way we could tackle this. So need for project. Again, not the prettiest pictures. This is just a vignette of the kinds of things that if you go down to the wastewater treatment plant, you will see. On the left, we're looking at preliminary screening. So this is essentially what pulls the trash out before it goes through all of the pumps and the pipes and the basins. And I would cast no aspersions toward Huber. They make a fine screen, but the way that screen was put in outside, the fact that Tom and his team has been able to do as good of a job as they have with what they've been given is really a testament to a lot of effort and putting up with a lot of challenges there. I'll bet you coming out there in January when everything's getting froze up, I would not want to be the one to do that. And when all is said and done, as Jason said, looking at the next 20 years, we don't want to have the next 20 years of operations have to kind of Band-Aid and bubble gum to kind of make it work. If you look in the middle, I'm sorry, if you can go back just one more. That middle picture, this is Building 30. Tom, should I tell them what we call that one? Dirty 30. This is basically where a lot of the treatment happens. You have a ton of great tankage in there. Now, frankly, you probably have more tankage than you need. And so what we've proposed within this plan is by no means to take away the long-term use of that tankage, but it is to basically save some operating costs, get it into a condition where it's not a safety hazard, which is what it is right now, and then ultimately have that kind of spare capacity if, let's say, a major industry comes to town that wants to go and have a large amount of loading, we could fire this back up. But in the meantime, essentially take advantage of the fact that the kind of twin structure, Building 35, is really the focus of it, and a lot less kind of maintenance hazards, et cetera. What you see on the right, so basically this is the press for pressing the sludge. I don't have a picture of the sludge storage. One of the few capacity limitations at the plant right now is really dealing with biosolids. And so a lot of the facilities, we're not talking about building a brand new facility by any means. It's really where is the value already, and how can we get most of this to last another at least 20 years, as Jason alluded to. And basically 20 years is kind of your standard lifetime for equipment. And so this was put in somewhere around 20 years ago. So a lot of the mechanical equipment is what needs to have that kind of rejuvenation, that new piece of equipment, whereas a lot of the structures themselves, it's minor changes to basically get them to have another 2 decades of life.
I think some of you were part of the last go around, right? So we had the last upgrade in 07 and 08. So, and obviously 20 years ago. So that's why we're talking about it again.
Right.
I think I'm the only one.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the treatment plant, and that's where the lion's share of this work is, but we would be remiss if we didn't also look really hard at the collection system. A lot of the pump stations that basically pump the waste to kind of those main, basically back to the treatment plant, a lot of them are actually in pretty good shape. So, South Street is doing fine. What you're seeing pictures of here are on the left, you're looking at the Honey Creek lift station, and Honey Creek, and then the wastewater treatment plant lift station, which I don't have a picture of, but you can, it's right at the treatment plant itself. Each of them handle about half of your community's flows. So if we have a failure at either of those lift stations, that is a critical issue. What you're seeing in the middle, basically that's the School Street lift station, which is already kind of underway, which I don't think I need to bring everyone up to speed on for that. I know we worked with Eileen within the past year on kind of addressing that separately. But all of that basically is captured kind of within that plan for the DNR of what they need to see. Now, this has not been submitted to DNR. This is still in draft form. I see my job as a technical advisor, and so I want to basically provide that information, but ultimately empower, obviously, staff and Jason to feel confident in the approach, and then to bring it to decision makers to ultimately say, yes, this is a major investment for our community, and this is the direction we need to go to be proactive for the next couple decades. So all in all, we identified this into basically 5 pieces. 2 of them, School Street, basically the design is already underway for School Street lift station. And the treatment plant, I think it would be a problem if we continue to let a lot of that equipment just keep on keeping on. And so we put a time frame in here of somewhere in the immediate time frame. Now we understand there's a lot of budgetary constraints and things are juggling. So we're not jamming anyone. We're not saying this must happen today. But what we're recommending is basically within the next few years of essentially making those improvements, at least at the treatment plant. What you see then below that, those last 3 items, are the treatment plant lift station, which it could very easily be combined with the treatment plant upgrade itself. Site work, same contractors, et cetera, and you'd probably have some cost savings if you did so. And then the Honey Creek lift station replacement, which is a significantly more expensive lift station project, more costly lift station project than the other 2, and that has everything to do with the force main that needs to basically convey from that lift station over at Honey Creek and bringing it over to the plant itself. So these are facility plan estimates. These are you can think of in the plus or minus, 30% kind of range. And so if you see these numbers fluctuate as this project develops, that's where that is. I go out of my way, frankly, to be conservative at this state because I don't want you guys handing me the shovel in 2 years where you say, well, Leo, you said you could get it done for $5.7 million. So we try to put in plenty of contingencies for things that we have not yet been able to consider. We are still at the 10,000-foot view. But this gives you an idea, and it's no small undertaking. If you total all that up, we're around $24 million in total project costs. And I understand for a community this size, I live in Lake Mills. It's a big ask for a community. What you see then in the kind of second column with numbers where it says new debt service, we went ahead and put with those capital costs we assumed for now. The Clean Water Fund program interest rate, which is 2.2%. We assumed if that interest rate is what is used, what would we be looking at for new debt service? And then on the next slide, we kind of show how that plays into rates. So this is a stacked bar graph. On the left is what is for the $1.5 million in annual costs that are borne out right now. About half of it is on operations and maintenance costs, so essentially running the plant. The other half, thereabouts, is in the debt service that is expiring in a couple of years. And so that sort of darker blue, that's going to be coming off the books in, I believe it's 27 or 28, 27, thanks. What you see then on the right is those 3 major components. I ignored the kind of other miscellaneous, $500,000 in lift station upgrades, collection system upgrades. But you can basically see that lighter blue, where it says the treatment plant upgrade, it's going to be comparable. So basically, as the treatment plant debt service that's coming off the books from the project from 20 years ago comes off, they're similar in how much would be coming on for just the treatment plant. It would be an increase, we expect, but it'd be similar. It's really once you also start stacking those additional lift stations on all at the same time, if all that's taken on, now we're looking at in total, basically it's a 40% increase. Now, if you go to the next slide in terms of what does 40% mean, we're talking like an $80 per ratepayer quarterly increase, or somewhere around $26 a month. And so that's not by any means something that we're all going to just brush off. I mean, that's real money. It's also something that, as we've all seen over the past several years, I mean, things are more expensive than they were. And so in a lot of communities, as they start taking on things like this, we can start to basically raise rates steadily and slowly so as to not just have a kerplunk when it all hits at once. So that's one approach to take on. But as I mentioned earlier, what we've basically spelled out for these different pieces, we're not saying they all have to happen right now as one giant project. I think that we wouldn't be doing our job if we didn't bring it to your attention that within the planning period, and sooner would be better than later. I think Tom can attest to that. These things are things that are going to have to get done within the next 20 years. And the question is, especially for the lift stations, when does the village want to phase that in? Do we want to take advantage of the fact that you're going to have an economy of scale if you bring on one contractor to do all of them at the same time? Or do these get bid out as separate projects? And so, Eileen, if you go to the last slide. So this is where we stand today. We are in June, and so what we would like to do is to submit the facilities plan to the DNR next month. That's a would like to, not must, not we are up against some hard deadline. That's a would like to. Usually there's about a 90-day review period from the DNR. They basically go through what we've proposed. They make comments. We address those, and the more planful and on the same page we can be with the plan reviewers at DNR, the fewer changes that are later. And so that's why I'm showing here starting design basically 90 days later, so sometime this fall. This is probably going to be about a 9-month design process to take kind of all these pieces and incorporate them, and another 3 months for plan review again from DNR. Once we get through that, that's when we have documents that can actually go out to bid. When we have contract documents that can go out to bid, that's where we get real numbers. Until then, we're getting my best estimates based on similar projects and what we've seen elsewhere in the field. But that's when we see real numbers. That's when we see what the interest rate actually is. Those are when this doesn't become just an idea and it becomes it started really implementing. And if we did keep with that schedule, you can expect somewhere about a year and a half. I was, again, trying to be conservative, that basically by about fall of 2028, we could be completing that construction. And so as far as kind of how these rates would be coming off for the existing debt service for the treatment plant and coming on, they would sort of come at about the right time to not have a big shift. So with that, the last slide I have is for questions. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Questions? Can we go back to the project phase summary slide for a second? I think it's the second, or the first slide after the pictures, yeah. So no new debt service there on the school street because that's covered by TID 5, right? I mean, we're...
Correct,
Okay.
right?
There would be debt service,
But-
but the intent would be the sewer funds not paying it.
Right, not to the ratepayer, right? Okay. And the reason why I asked, and I guess, is the Honey Creek lift station, that's the one on Buell Drive, right?
Correct.
Does that serve anything north,
Of
like the creek?
Yes.
it serves the South Street lift station area. I'm trying to think what else.
Everything to the south of the creek, and then everything coming through South Street, which would essentially be the northwest quadrant of the village, comes through South Street, which comes to Honey Creek.
So what about the old Trent Tube site, if we develop that?
That will come through Honey Creek.
So if we do a TID 6, similar to offset some of those costs there, so it gives us more incentive to push that remediation along to get those plans. Okay. And I guess, so the 14 million there, that's the kind of restructuring Building 30. that you
Yeah, well,
talked about.
there's a lot there. I mean, you can think of all of the mechanical equipment, so we're talking blowers, we are talking pumps, we are kind of the screens themselves.
Sludge,
Press,
that's sludge
right.
building,
And
correct?
A new building.
And storage.
Yeah, one of the larger line items is a new process building, so that instead of having that screen sitting up on the roof, of actually basically using the hydraulic grade line appropriately, where essentially we would have a new building that would be multifunctional, both screening on the way in as well as sludge handling on the way out. And also, as to Jason's point, basically being able to convey dewatered sludge, so we're saving on operating costs.
Exactly. That would be the key thing there is operational
Right.
efficiencies would improve.
Right. And you'll see, again, if you go back to the slide that follows this, I didn't go into details of trying to estimate. I mean, those existing O&M costs, we're kind of setting those forward. Are there going to be things that are going to end up being saving? Yeah, but I'm not going to try to sell you guys on.
Those are soft costs. that
Correct,
will- yeah,
correct.
I got you. Okay. So you've got, the two other, School Street's spoken for. So the other two lift stations, you've got marked as, over the next 5 to 20 years.
Right.
Like, what realistically is that? Is that closer to 5 or is it closer to 20?
I would say it's closer to 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'd say it's within 5 to 10. You push it up past that, and
Okay. And would either of those projects address what I'll call single point of failure concern that you brought up?
each of the projects, I mean, lift stations are built with redundancy, right?
Okay.
The issue we start running into at Honey Creek is it's not just the pumps themselves. I mean, that's how we deal with the redundancy that way. But if you go down there like we did, and you start looking at the structure itself, I mean, we're asking a lot of that can to continue on for another 2 decades.
And what you have to remember with Honey Creek is that can goes 40 feet down into the ground in an area with groundwater.
Right.
All right. I think this is my last question. So for that 14 million for the plant upgrades, I know we don't have direction yet on PFAS on the treatment side of things. What should we be thinking about there?
Sure. So we've talked about this quite a bit. So PFAS when it comes to wastewater, so not water. Where do we expect PFAS regulations when they come to wastewater? Could there be PFAS regulations on the effluent itself? It's possible, but I think that'll be the last of the 3. The first is on drinking water, which you're already running into. The second's going to be on sludge. The question's going to be, where do regulators want PFAS that's in sludge to go? We don't have a hard answer on that. And as Jason, Tom, and I, and Jim Smith, others, we've talked about, one thing that some engineers would do is to say, well, you got to build a dryer. You build a dryer, then you basically drive off the water. Now we have as concentrated sludge as we can, and that is going to be our lowest cost alternative. And that might be true if those regulations bear out. But until they do, I don't want to come into a community like yours and say, you know what you need? You need a dryer. You need a building to put it in, et cetera, because those regulations are still in flux. One of the alternatives we considered was whether or not we should continue to dewater, so basically bring it to like a cake 20-ish%, maybe a little bit less than that, or whether we should take advantage of some of the local connections, Pat Sanitary Service as an example, and save some money on the capital side. And when we did the net present value on that, it was basically a tie, whether we should just thicken or whether we should go the next step to dewater. And we decided that the tie at that point, if it's dollars and cents or tying, the tie is going to go to the more concentrated to be best prepared to go to the next step if PFAS comes along and we do need to have volume reduction to get to a dryer. But we do not, within this plan, try to predict and give equipment for everything that may come to be. Frankly, if PFAS is limited in biosolids, and there's rules about applying them back to farmland, that is a world of hurt for everybody across this entire field. So, and I would expect too that regionalized drying would probably be the most cost effective. And at that point, I don't want to start guessing what McGuanago and others are going to do.
I lied. It's not my last question, because you said something that made me think of. So we have these agreements with the farmers, right, that how we've done some offsets. And I think we're pretty unique in that approach that we've put that together. So would we be changing any of that with what we're proposing here?
No, but there could be some change on that horizon as well. DNR changing rules again with the TMDL. I don't know if you want to touch on that. I mean, really, what we're talking about here, the answer to your question is no.
Correct.
It's not.
I get, regulations change, right? And so the best we can do is build for what we know. And I think you answered my first question about PFAS really well, which is we're also not backing ourselves into a corner where all of a sudden, well, no, we're going to have to go spend $10 million and, 7 or 8 of it's to undo something that we did.
Correct.
Okay, that's my bigger concern,
Right.
is that we're going to redo work.
Right. Really briefly, to Jason's point, I think that the partnership you guys have with Pete Went, that's going to stand the test of time. That's my opinion of it, based on everything that I've learned about this TMDL that's coming. You guys are in a really good position on phosphorus.
Other questions? Sorry to monopolize. So are you looking for a motion? Or?
So a couple things. First of all, I guess, do you have anything you want to add? Okay. That's unlike him. So obviously, I'll tell you, when I saw this, I had sticker shock, right? I mean, this is some big stuff here we're looking at. And some of the things that they brought to our attention were also kind of eye-opening. But a couple things here. So I want to make sure we're all understand that capacity is not driving this at all. So when we did our upgrade 20 years ago, capacity was the big driver at that time. So we've got capacity. Things didn't quite develop out over the last 20 years like they had projected previously. So I just want to make sure we're clear on all that. Obviously, the discussion here is going to come down to rates, right? We all know that that's what drives this thing is the rates that we want to convey to our ratepayers. And the other thing I just want to point out, while this is on the water side, not necessarily the wastewater side like we're talking about tonight, but everybody looks at their bill as the water bill, right? And that's the sewer and the water combined. I just want to remind you, we're also starting to talk about a new well. And so that will likely require an increase in water rates on that side. So we just need to be thinking about all these things as we have this discussion. The big driver right now is, so two more things. We don't have anything budgeted for any design in 2026 with the CIP stuff you're about to look at or probably already have looked at. Now, the sewer utilities does have some pretty healthy reserves, as Brian will tell you. So, there is potential to do some design in 2026, but right now, there's nothing in the CIP for that. The real deadline here, from my understanding from Leo, is we really want to try to get this thing approved by DNR by the end of 2025. Basically, to head off any rule changes, again, knowing what we know today. So we don't have to do anything tonight. If the board would like some more information, we do have to host a public hearing. So we will have to bring this thing back and open it up for a public hearing. It's a DNR requirement. So really, we don't have to do anything tonight. It was really just more of bring it to you and start to have this discussion.
I do want to add something. All queued up. If you guys want to come see anything that we're talking about this or do a treatment plant tour, just reach out to me. We'll show you around. So.
Matt, dirty 30 did not get any better.
No, but I have been into the can on Honey Creek, so Mike took me Mike took me down there. Again, not having, we'll go through the CIP, discussion here in a few minutes, and we got more to do. I think you're right. Push forward and getting this submitted, do the public hearing, do all that planning. We'll continue to talk about, should we include some design work in the 26 budget or not? I think the big thing for me, and this is me speaking for myself, is when that debt service comes offline, and so that gives us a little bit more breathing room. And then to what I was kind of alluding to in the Honey Creek thing, how can we accelerate some of our work there to try to offset some other rate pressure, just like we've done for the School Street piece? So I think that's going to be, or I would ask with Brian, our focus of attention over the next few months. All right, if nothing else, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good presentation. Okay, item 3, review of capital improvement plan, CIP, with financial management plan for 2026 budget and 5-year plan. Brian from Ellers.
Good evening, everybody. I have no pictures. So we've
Just
gone from
big
library to wastewater
spreadsheets
to
and-
finance.
Do you have any pivot tables for me?
I think staff provided
Okay.
enough pivot tables on the CIP, which are very well done. One thing I'll add about the sewer discussion, just broadly speaking, understand that part of our annual engagement for the financial management plan is a 10-year cash flow. So we could really pinpoint that rate impact if we pinpoint years you would desire those projects to happen, right? So we can layer in the debt service structure, whatever we need. Think about even if we have a year where we're not utilizing a new gap in debt service, right? We're saving this money for a specific purpose. So just note, if we want to accelerate the sewer analysis or workshop there to dovetail with your public hearing to maybe not use $80 a quarter, we could do that. So just a thought for how you guys, structure the FMP timing there. So.
Yeah, I guess I'd say you guys talk. I mean, that's if you need like an extra month, I agree with the target of getting this filed by the end of the year, but I don't think we have to be like, oh, it's got to be in July. If you guys need June and July to do that conversation, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and we can have that ready in like mid-July. We just normally don't do it until a little bit later, so just a thought. And even if we don't have the 2026 operating budget, right, we can just go off of an assumption for the time being on the operating side. So anyway, that's the only thing I'd say on that. But here, workshop 1, if you remember, every year we come about this time to talk about the capital improvement plan and the initial run. So this has no operating analysis outside of one minor assumption. So if you will, Eileen, just we provide kind of a summary level detail of your 2025 through 2030 capital improvement plan by department. The total amount of capital costs right now, water, sewer, all of the levy impacted funds, as well as TID 5, which is obviously new, is in there, and that's at about $20.5 million in total. Now, the one thing I'll mention, as Jason just mentioned, the only sewer one that's really in there is the School Street lift station. So in theory, this is higher, right, once we incorporate the projects that they just discussed with the facilities plan. So again, we can incorporate that into the next workshop, but just letting you know that that number is probably higher when we're thinking about adding 14 million for the wastewater treatment plant, et cetera. So, but then a percentage by the fund. On the next slide, this is looking at the total sources of funding for that 20.5 million about by year. So the categories that we use for funding are general obligation debt, revenue debt. Right now, that's kind of the School Street lift station. Any grants that are coming in, and then other capital project fund revenues is a new one that we decided to put in this year after talking with staff and kind of analyzing, right, what you're actually doing with your 25 budget that's already approved. You've balanced that budget, right, with other revenues like interest revenues, things like that. So we did do that just so the table makes a little bit more sense and matches to your budget. Fund balance and reserves would be, whether it's the utilities or all of your assigned capital projects fund balances, that's coming out of, cash on hand or what we call fund balance or reserves. Tax levy, you annually levy a certain amount that do one of two things: pay for a project in that year, or you're accumulating it in that assigned fund balance for the capital projects fund. So you're not spending it that year, you're levying for it to hold on to those funds in order to pay for something in the future. So that's the tax levy component. And then equipment replacement fund is just tied to the sewer utility. If there's mechanical equipment that we see in the capital improvements plan that we feel would be suitable use out of the ERF, we assign it as such. That said, that might get a little more robust as we incorporate the facilities plan for the sewer utility as well. The most important one I do want to pay attention to is that tax levy category. And looking at it by year, underneath the totals, you'll see the projected levy capacity. Now, I explain how I get there later on in the presentation, wherein you have a base allowable levy under levy limits. You are allowed to increase that levy by net new construction every year. And then you can also claim other elements to increase the levy, but you can't say, hey, we got to buy some equipment, we're going to raise the levy in order to buy that. So you really have to fit in your capital levy within the confines of net new construction, or there's other opportunities with abated debt, but that's a bigger discussion. So right now, we've just assumed plus 0.95% of net new construction, and then an operating levy, for operations that increase, that operations need increases by 5%. So really, you have a decreasing availability to levy for capital, because we're saying the ability is 0.95%, and the thing that eats into it outside of capital is increasing faster than that, and much faster at 5%. So there, as you can see, kind of our cliff for capital levy starts in 2028. What we've been able to do with this plan is, utilize some of those assigned fund balances or just the general future capital assigned fund balance in order to decrease the levy to that projected allowable levy capacity, or we're borrowing for projects that have a longer useful life. So the cadence for borrowing, if you recall from last year's financial management plan, was biennially, starting in 2025. So we didn't borrow last year, and it would be 25, 27, and 29. So in the full tables that we provided, you'll see those three general obligation borrowings, borrowing for 2 years of projects. So really, if you're looking at what 2025's borrowing would be, it's about almost exactly $2 million, and then later on we throw in the cost of issuance and everything else. 2027, you're looking at just over $2 million, and then 2029, about 1.5 million in borrowing. So the highlights of the plan would be, as I just discussed, concerns for that limited levy, shown above, that there is a cliff. We kind of do show this every year. And note, the reason for doing so is if there's a cliff coming the next year, then we have a bigger budgeting discussion of, all right, we really don't have the opportunity to levy for our needs in the capital improvement plan. Here, this is actually kind of a better looking plan than was last year. We had some struggles fitting in the amount of capital levy we would have liked to. So here we have still the ability to levy about, $10 $300,000. We'll have to see what net new construction comes in at when we see that number in August of this year to determine was 0.95%, close enough, too little, too much. Table 10, which is the bigger tables that we did provide, the max tax rate on debt was $1.12 for every $1,000 of assessed. The total cost of debt for the CIP to a taxpayer, so this has nothing to do with utility rates, but just a taxpayer. So how much does it cost a sample taxpayer through all the life of the new debt, 2025 issue, 2027 issue, and the 2029 issue? It's about $3,700 through 2049, so that's paying over 24 years. And then Table 11 shows your general obligation debt capacity, and you get to about 35% of that limit, which is a great place to be. You know, we generally recommend not going above 50% of that limit, so you always have capacity for unknown emergency projects that may happen due to weather events or other things. And then Table 12 is something, just kind of the preliminary analysis based off of your 2024 numbers and the financials for the water and sewer utility. Just with the projects that we have in here today, you know, do we need to do something for rates as kind of a precursor to a future workshop where we talk about the 10-year cash flows for the utilities? That answer is yes, we got to build to the bigger projects we're looking to tackle. Excuse me. So then one of the other elements that we always look at is the village does an awesome job of putting together a robust assigned fund balance for the capital improvements program. I cannot tell you how many times I offer what we've put together for the village and what the village started out with without our help to say to other communities, you should be doing something that is this robust to say, assigning projects to specific things that will happen in the future and assigning a fund balance, therefore, in the capital projects fund. So here, the one thing I'll note is the green highlighted is your actuals from your 2024 audit. So you have about 2.6 million in assigned fund balance, and all that means is you have reserves sitting somewhere with a specific purpose in mind. Those purposes are on the left column, all identified individually. The biggest element here that we've built into the plan is to say, you know, if one were to have gone negative, we would need to borrow for it or use that general at the bottom future capital projects assigned balance. That's kind of a for any capital project in the future. So you will see that that one goes down to about 75,000. So that would be kind of a concern, right? If you have inflationary pressures, you know, that could get worse. Just looking at, do we, you know, then have to kind of borrow for other projects that come along? But at the end of the day, we don't go negative in any of these categories, so that is kind of good news there. And we've incorporated, if you did go negative, we would have to borrow for it already. So here, while it is a concern, I'll just say you do start to build that back up under your current CIP through 2030. So again, while there's a concern, it's not a very high level concern.
Does that bottom line already reflect us reallocating surplus from last year? We haven't done that yet.
So I'm assuming you're meaning like when we do a transfer from general, we did not do a transfer from general last year. There wasn't a significant amount, so sometimes I'll skip a year.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So then on the next slide, this is what I was speaking to when I showed the projected capital levy available. What you're looking at is the cap is the orange line. So we're solving for your max base levy, assuming no use of abated debt. So as we've talked about in the past, you do have the option to levy for your full general obligation debt payments, even if you have another revenue source to pay for that general obligation debt service. So the simplest way to think about this, if you do a road project for $1 million and half of it is the utilities, right? So you don't need to pay half of that out of levy. You would be paying out of user rates from the utilities. However, under state statute, you could levy for that full amount and use that levy for other things. Generally, you don't want to use that for operating costs, because once that debt drops off, right, now we got to pull salaries or something important. So we do say you should, if, a community's willing to use abated debt, you use it for capital projects. For this projected levy, we're not even going through that funky math to say, hey, this is what it looks like if you do use abated debt. So it's kind of to say, do you have capacity in the near term without using abated debt at a 0.95% net new construction at or beyond, or starting with what you levied last year, this year, I should say. The tan column is the operating levy expectation. We go through a much deeper dive in that in fall with a future workshop. So this will be kind of isolated and analyzed way more in depth in the future. But for now, we just kind of went with the same assumption we made this time last year, which was we'll take your 25 budget for operating levy and add 5% to that annually. So as that increases and the gap, or our ceiling is not increasing as much, the gap shrinks, or the green, your availability to levy for capital needs will decrease. So again, this is under a set of assumptions, but just to describe those assumptions, I put together this chart. So and then if you want to, next slide is looking at some considerations there for kind of the total plan as it stands here today. Again, the message is the same every year. Grab as much as you can for capital projects levy. Don't leave any levy money on the table, specifically base levy. The abated debt not incorporated into this plan would be something that you incorporate if you're willing to kind of negotiate with yourselves on tax rate, right, your impact to the end user. So the chart here just kind of shows your total levy historically from 23 to 25, the bolded rows of what you've done historically. This is your levy, total levy, so operating, capital, and debt service. So there, right, the levies, slowly increase. You can see what the tax rate results are, and then kind of annual taxes on a $250,000 property value. There, when you see the increases in 26 and then 2031, those are the new debt service coming on from the 2025 borrowing and then the 2029 borrowing. So there's, small spikes in between. Those are more the operating, pressures that we've spoken to. But that said, all other things being equal, we'll obviously know future valuations come August to isolate the 2026 impact. But there isn't a lot of room in your existing debt levy. It's not like the sewer utility, as it was just described, where you have significant debt service dropping off in this year or in 2026. So we're going to have as minimal as an impact as possible. So we really allocated the 2025 levy for debt service way down into future years as much as possible to have the smallest impact as possible there. That said, new money, new problems, right? You got an interest payment that's going to start no matter what, and that's kind of about a 20-cent impact there, which, we have a full table to kind of show that in the full tables if you'd like to dive a little bit deeper. The other thing that I'll mention is we are kind of using this time here today to talk about the 2025 borrowing. In April of 2024, the state passed new legislation that general obligation notes can now go 20 years. So there's really no, hey, if we're borrowing for more than 10 years, we got to call it bonds, then we got to do a bunch of extra steps. We're just doing notes. So right now, the plan would be to provide kind of a pre-sale report that we wouldn't really need to come re-present because we've talked about already that we are going to be borrowing in 2025. so that you can at least look at it at a future meeting, but then going to market for your second meeting in July. Did I have that correct? Okay. Just wanted to make sure I had that right in my head. So going to market in the second week of July. GEO notes do not come with the need for a set sale resolution. You really can just kind of go straight out to market, and considering the fact that we're talking about it here today, we're going to do the pre-sale report at a future meeting that will just provide kind of for informational purposes. It's up to the board if you want to do a set sale resolution that ultimately greenlights the process, but more or less by analyzing this plan here today and then reviewing the pre-sale report at a future meeting, and in talking with staff, we didn't, kind of determine that an extra step was needed for a set sale resolution. So we just kind of wanted to talk about that. If we would like to, I can go into more detail on the 2025 borrowing. But we're looking at about, like I said, I think it was $2.2 million, looking at the capital costs and then the cost of issuance, with more details to follow with the pre-sale report. And then the last slide is just kind of next steps, I believe. Yes. So really, future considerations over the summer as we get into the fall, more deep dive into the budget would be prioritizing that levy capacity versus tax rate and considerations for tax rate, given that you would have new debt service coming on in 2026, which we'll know the final details of mid-July. We'll have a better sense of could we use abated debt, but I'm going to guess our answer is going to be pretty limited and closer to no for the 2026 budget, just knowing that new debt service is coming online. That's already going to have an impact to the total tax rate. So that might be off the table for this year when it's been kind of more on the table in prior years. Thinking about that capital levy minimum and making sure that we're always using it. And then, again, the future workshops, we're going to dive a little deeper into the levy adjustments once we know more information, and those come, after August certified values, and we go through the full operating needs.
So any debt that we were talking about a minute ago for sewer, that would be revenue?
Revenue bonds, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, you talked about abated debt, are there any options or anything being discussed at the state level about any type of relief related to if we're issuing debt? Because I know a big part of our 2025 debt is for emergency services. Anything in that area?
Not anything that's concrete.
Okay.
I just want to point out for our newest members, when you look at that declining ability to levy for, I don't know why I'm getting such bad feedback here, to levy for the capital projects, this is not unique, and I think Brian can speak to that. There's a lot of communities that have already diminished that ability to levy, and that speaks to the levy limits and kind of the quandary that we're in. But I wanted to let you know, it's not an ideal position to be in, but this is not a unique situation.
Yeah, most communities that we do this for do not have the authority to levy for capital. So it's been a worthwhile exercise for the village, speaking to the credit rating, just anecdotally there, and getting a higher credit rating through all the planning efforts. And while we show this cliff, right, it adjusts every year, but the forward thinking at least shows us if the cliff happens, what do we need to do, and being prepared to navigate those elements, I think has put the village in a good position to not overborrow, right? And really think about, we're going to borrow for the things we absolutely need, and then at certain points in time, we might have to throw in some extra, or we move the projects as we're able to, or reassign fund balance. So you guys have always created as many financial doors as possible, but you navigate in a very narrow context, especially with levy limits as they're currently constructed. So not to mention ARPA and a few other things have saved the day, and I'm not projecting any future saves in here, so.
And in there, we had a TID closure, which has helped us. We've had some good net new construction years, but good net new construction years aren't always going to happen. That's obviously very dependent on the economy.
So I don't want to get into all the details and different projects. How far are you guys as staff along and kind of laying out? I mean, I know we kind of threw another curveball here on the sewer side, but what else do you guys have to do to kind of come up with what you think is the 26 capital plan?
I think really it's pretty much what we've presented is what it is. Jason had a memo that I think we had some questions about the boardroom. Did you want to talk about those things tonight?
Sure.
To get some direction.
Everybody knows what we did in the lobby there, and we're looking to kind of continue that. So we just painted the exterior of the building. Now we're looking to maybe start with this room and do some improvements in here to kind of update it, modernize it. And one of the things we've looked at there is carpeting, paint. We potentially talked about some different options for the furniture we're all sitting at. I did learn through a supplier. I had no idea what this roof looked like, so I had a contractor come and take a look at it for us. And he said, boy, this roof is from 1998. I thought when we purchased the building, we had put a roof on it, but evidently we didn't. So it's time. It's time for a roof, and there is some hail damage up here. I'm going to pursue that to see if potentially we might have some insurance coming back at us for that. I don't know where that will go, and I'm not planning on that for sure. But we are going to need to put a roof on this building. So, but we do want to continue to update the building, and the next area to focus on would be this room here.
So roof, just rubber roof?
So it's a membrane roof, like a Duralast roof. This actually is a Duralast, and it actually has a date stamp right on it of 1998. I didn't realize they were dated.
Did you talk to any roofers about a plan of putting stone over the top of that?
I have not.
Even with a new roof, if you put some stone over the top of it, it stops that sun exposure and extends the life of it. So just a thought.
Okay, I can go, take a look at that option.
So Jason did include the roof and estimate for the boardroom improvements in the 26 budget, correct, Jason?
That is correct. They're both currently in the 26 budget. I believe the roof was $150,000, and the upgrades to the room here, I think we budgeted $60,000.
Right, which a huge portion of that is the carpeting. And I want to remind the board that the projects that have been done thus far and the ones that are in the budget for 2026 have been paid through reserves. So the air conditioning, the lobby, we have set aside money over the years for this building. But I know the reserves are going to get quite a bit low if we do the boardroom and the roof. So we're really just looking for the board's direction, whether they want the boardroom included. I don't think the roof is going to be much of a choice.
Yeah, I think the roof is more of a necessity.
Yeah, so I think the roof is primary. As much as I'd like to have, and we also kind of speak a little bit for Judge Cotter because he uses this space as well, but my personal opinion is I'd rather see improvements in other aspects of the building that the residents are more likely to use. So I know like our two meeting rooms over here, anything like that. I think we're clearly using this now, but I think when you do this is a big deal. So I would just, since you're taking on a big roof project, figure out like how do we kind of sequence this. So I just look for your guys' recommendation. Thoughts? My only question on your memo was about the 2026 work on Highway 20. Are they going to adjust the heights of those manhole covers, or is that a cost that we would have to absorb?
So the sanitary manhole covers are on us. That's our sanitary utility. All of the storm sewer in that corridor is on DOT. So over the years, there's been many comments about the noisy manholes, and that's been brought to their attention time and time again through this process and through this project. But those are on the DOT. It's only our sanitary manholes that come basically off of side streets that end up being in the new pavement limits. That's why we have involvement. Same with the water boxes.
Other questions, comments about CIP? All right, thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, item 4, direction of staff, any potential changes to services to consider in the 2026 operations budget. Eileen.
So this is something we bring to the board every year. I'm bringing it earlier this year, given the fact that, we start our operations budget so early. Department heads are going to have their budgets in by the end of July. So we always come to the board and say, is there anything you want us to evaluate as far as level of services? An example from prior years was the leaf collection. So this is an opportunity to talk about those things if there's anything you want us to review. In addition, in my memo, I include assumptions that I'm suggesting to be incorporated in the budget for salary, structure, and performance range increases. This is very preliminary at this point. I'm still waiting for some data from some other organizations, but since we work on that operations budget so early, we have to put something in there. For 2026, I am suggesting we start with salary structure adjustment of 2.4%. That was actually what somebody's projecting for Social Security adjustment, and performance range of 2.9%. Those are different because of the different ways that the structure works. When somebody's in the step range of the salary structure, they will proceed up steps with years of service, provided they're meeting or exceeding expectations. So those steps are adjusted by that percentage, so they're moving up that step. People in the performance range get that flat increase if they're meeting or exceeding expectations. They're different because there does create some disparities if you keep them the same. The other thing I talk about in my memo is we do a market update. We've been doing them about every 4 years to the salary structure. That would mean if we're going to do 4 years, I need to include the cost for the market update in the 2026 budget to be implemented 1/1 of 27. I do caution the board in my memo. I mean, obviously, this is, I think it might have been Jim, but I'm not sure. One of the trustees asked me a question when we did our orientation meeting and said, what keeps you awake at night? And I said, levy limits and how do you retain good employees? Because that's always one of our challenges is, we have a great staff. We want to keep a great staff. Less turnover is really good for the village. We've seen the things we can do and accomplish when we have, a good staff and not a lot of turnover. But doing that, you want to stay competitive with wages, which we know has been a challenge in this environment. My concern is we do the market update and we might have to look at a staggered implementation if the levy doesn't allow for that. So we just have to know what we're getting into. But with all that explanation, really what I'm looking for from the board is if you'd prefer to see that, update the 4th year, which would be, I'd include that cost in the 26 budget, or wait another year, and just seeing if you're okay with the preliminary assumptions I plan to put in the budget, and then if you have any additions to service.
How much is a study normally?
My memory says it's about $7,000 or $8,000 to do the study.
I think we can find $7,000 or $8,000 to make sure that we've got the data to retain good quality staff. Other thoughts about services, salaries for 26? No? Okay. Anything else, Eileen? All right. sorry.
Eileen, could you explain again on the step range versus the performance? We've got the minimum step 5. How does that work? What does that mean for an employee here? What does that mean for salary increases?
So when somebody's in the step range, they are progressing, so there's steps 1 through 6. You look at a position, and it's ranked. All the positions are ranked by the responsibility, decision-making, various things. So you rank them by letter, grade, where they fall, and then for each position, you have a step range of 6 steps, and then you move into the performance range. When you get to step 6, you are considered to be at 100% of market pay for that position. And then that performance range goes from 100% to 120%. When you're in that step range, you are progressing up steps in those first 6 years, depending on where somebody's hired. We are going to hire somebody further into that step range if their experience justifies that, right? We're not going to hire somebody at step 1 that's walking in with a lot of valuable experience for a position. When they get to step 6, if we keep the steps, your whole salary structure increasing at a certain percentage, and we do the performance percentages exactly the same, those people forever stay at the step 6. So that's why I'm recommending your performance range increase be slightly more, because people in step ranges are not getting the 2.4%. They're getting the step increase, which was adjusted by your 2.4%. Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay. Move on to ordinances, resolutions. Item 1, 2025-07, resolution approving 2024 compliance maintenance annual report. This is Seymour. If you got questions for Tom? Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Tammy. Have a good night. Any questions for Tom on this resolution?
So the CMAR is kind of the report card for the DNR. That's, we answer a bunch of questions from the previous year, and the DNR gives us a GPA, so. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2025-07, approving the 2024 Compliance Maintenance Annual Report.
I'll second.
All right, questions or discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Tom. Oh, he's not done yet. Item 1, staff reports, 2025 sanitary survey.
That one's actually on me.
Oh, sorry.
So now we're talking water utility, not wastewater utility, and so every few years we have our DNR inspection. DNR comes in, looks at all facilities, goes through all our records, and reviews everything, and then provides us feedback, or essentially the letter that you're seeing there. There's a couple of recommendations that the DNR had for us this time around, and then pointed out that we were not doing an annual inspection of the exterior or the top of both water tanks, which we've never done in the past, but is a requirement. So we are now doing that. We have it set up that our computer software spits out a ticket, says you got to go climb the towers and check the vents and the seals and such, and so we're doing that now.
All right, any questions on that? All right, item 2, 2025 annual watershed report. That's Tom, sorry, I got it backwards.
I think you were referencing this earlier, Matt, about the unique trade that we had. And it is unique. I was told by our basin engineer that this was the first one approved in the state when we did it, so. 30,000-foot view of this is we document the efforts that we're making within the treatment plant with chemical addition, and then document the cover crops on the fields that we're trading for. And all of the documents, all the information is from the previous year. So when you're looking at that information, you got to think in 2024. This is all driven by the ultra-low phosphorus limits that we got in our new permit.
Just for the newer trustees, we have to have a permit from the DNR to operate our wastewater treatment plant, and that permit is renewed every 5 years, right? And this is one of the boxes we need to check throughout that process. Every year, we have to provide this update to the DNR on how we're doing in our phosphorus optimization.
I just find it funny, this is our last agenda item, and it's what consumes the majority of the packet. So,
Well, the permit's attached to that, and the permit's a lot, so
okay.
feel free to get after it if you want to.
A lot of
fall
those same
asleep.
appendices were in the wastewater facilities planning. I said, let's not send this through twice. Let's remove all those. So.
I'll let you know if I have any trouble falling asleep this evening.
And then I just saw that you scrolled down, that Fox TMDL was referenced a little bit tonight when we were talking about the facilities plan, and we have mentioned the moving target or new regulations, and we don't really know how that's going to work yet. But Leo referenced it, the trade that we have currently and the fact that Mr. Wendt is really buying into the cover crops and planting more, and we have the ability to register them for the future is really turning out to be very fortunate for us. So,
I guess for our new board members, you guys got an award for this, right? Or you were at a presentation, you were recognized for this was it Appleton or Green Bay?
I gave 2 presentations on this trade. I did one for Government Affairs up in Madison, and then I did one in Eden for a WWA meeting.
So you're confusing, we had the 2024 Newcomer of the Year in Denny Largent, right? And then you were the 2021 Wastewater Operator of the Year for the state? 2020.
I am sorry, I'm confusing our multiple awards.
Our trophy case.
And
how horrible of a situation this is.
well, if we're dusting off awards, we also won Facility of the Year in 2021. So.
You guys should have led with that before asking for, all the millions of dollars, right? Okay, any other questions for Tom? All right, with that, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much this evening. Have a good week. Oh, reminder, it is, Memorial Day was our 125th anniversary as a village, and the first Friday, there's an event down there, some tables and other things this Friday for that.